that's your choice. My name is Lizzie Dyer. I am project manager for Feeding Gloucestershire, and we are facilitating this workshop today. Paul Fox is here from Money and Pension Service. He is the Southwest rep and is kindly going to speak to us all today about the service and what it might be able to offer us as a county. We're a really nice mix today. We've got people here from revenue and benefits teams at district level. We've got plenty of people from agencies that are working in communities, supporting people about money and benefits and advice. Just a little bit of context for the workshop and why we sort of got it started. For those of you that don't know, Feeding Gloucestershire, we are a county-wide organisation. We are part of the Feeding Britain network, so we do feed into a lot of the national conversations. And we also have capacity at each district level within our county. We've got a very easy aspiration. We are looking to facilitate and coordinate work around greater food equity in the county. So, no big task there. And what we've learned, we've got various different projects that we are overseeing. But one of our areas of work is around financial inclusion, because we cannot separate food insecurity from that financial insecurity. The two do go hand in hand. And I think the financial inclusion piece for us started with coordinating some worrying about money leaflets that are created by IVAN, so the Independent Food Aid Network, and we worked with Trussell Trust to create a leaflet that was unique to each district, that is being distributed around in partnership with our district councils, our community wellbeing teams. Many of you might even be listed on those leaflets, and others might be using them to signpost. If any of you here today are not familiar with those leaflets and would like more information or copies of those leaflets, my details will be in the chat, but please put that request in the chat and I will follow it up after this meeting. The other area of work that we're really looking at is trying to utilise the national schemes. So obviously we have a welfare state. We have benefits and schemes in place to help our communities. And I think it's really important that we do all we can to make that accessible, to the pathways into support and advice as easy as possible. And we need to really try and fulfill the capacity of those schemes. So some of the work that we're doing is around looking at, for instance, the Healthy Start initiative. And we're aware now, because data is readily available, that our uptake as a county of that scheme is below the national average. So we've got over 40% of eligible families not accessing that benefit. And I know that by speaking to other district leads, that there's other areas that have an undertake, whether that's council tax support, pension credits, and so on and so forth. So we really are looking to see how we can best utilise what's already available, and making sure that our communities and individuals have all the help and support that they need. And then we look at what's needed on top of that when they're fully utilising what they're entitled to. The purpose of bringing Paul in today is Paul and I have had several conversations over recent months discussing the fact that capacity is very difficult for everyone at the moment. We're obviously going back into that winter period, and I think whether you're at district council or whether you're a VCSE organisation, there isn't an abundance of capacity in terms of advice and benefit support. And so we were looking to see what we could do and how we could partner up with maybe a national organisation or an external organisation that might be able to come in and help alleviate some of those capacity issues in one way or another. And no tall order, Paul, but that is our aspiration for today, is to hear really how Money and Pension Service can help our local agencies, find some greater capacity, or maybe there's other pathways into that advice and support that we can triage across and therefore free up some of that specific local capacity for communities that need it greatest. So that's plenty for me. I will now pass over to Paul, who's going to really give us a breakdown of the services that are on offer and how they might be able to help us all. Questions, if there's a burning question while Paul's speaking, I'm sure if he can, he will answer it as he goes, but we've got plenty of time at the end to really discuss what Paul said and question it and look at and see what solutions might come out of this conversation. So over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Lizzie, thank you very much. No pressure noted on that. We'll see what we can do this morning. Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be with you from right across the county of Gloucestershire. I'm in West Dorset, so I'm not a million miles away. My son lives in Gloucester with his wife, so I'm a relatively frequent visitor to the county, one of my favourite spots in the southwest. What I wanted to do is, first of all, just say thank you to Lizzie for really convening this. It's a great opportunity to talk to various different organisations and agencies from right across the county. And really, although you've got different remits and your organisations have different objectives and different strategies, ultimately this conversation is simply about there are a lot of people, a lot of households across Gloucestershire at the moment who are having a particularly difficult time, particularly around money. And so what I wanted to take the opportunity to do this morning was to introduce you to the Money and Pension Service, who we are and what we do. I'm going to outline sort of a broad range of resources and tools that we have at our disposal that we could hopefully link into some of your organisations and some of your work, ultimately to benefit those people who are struggling. But I'm going to focus as well on debt for 5-10 minutes, particularly for the local authorities who are represented here this morning. But I'll kick off with a sort of a quick high level overview. We are what's called an arm's length government body. So we sit underneath the Department for Work and Pensions, and we also advise the Treasury on things such as debt advice and financial capability, various aspects around fraud and pensions and so forth. And really we have a single overarching remit under statutes, and that is that we are available to everybody across the United Kingdom who would benefit from money and pensions guidance at any point throughout their lives. So that could range from our work in financial education for children, young people, right the way through to trying to support people in the later stages of life who maybe are financially vulnerable. And in between those two sort of pillars, if you like, we do a huge amount of work in areas such as credit, around debt advice, which we fund much of the debt advice across England. It's a little bit different in the devolved nations. And we provide those guidance services really in many different ways. So my focus this morning is, because we've got such a broad range of organisations, is to just set out what some of those resources are, how you can access them. And what I will do, obviously, Lizzie has my contact details. I'll drop them into the chat towards the end anyway. But if anybody wants to stick a hand up and ask something that leaps to mind as I'm going through, please do. I have no problems with answering things as we go, or wait to the end. I hope you'll be delighted to know that there is no PowerPoint slide deck at all this morning, because they are probably my least favourite thing in the world. I'd much rather talk to people and have that engagement. But what I will do is later on today, once we've had this session, is I will circulate via Lizzie, if I may, Lizzie, some a bit more detail about some of the things that we're going to talk about this morning. So I'm going to kick off with, in fact, I'm probably going to plunge straight into debt advice, because that's a really core part of this morning. We knew that debt advice, or the demand for debt advice, was rising pre-pandemic back in 2020, and we saw a sudden spike in those first few months of that year. What we didn't anticipate, and I don't think anybody did really, any agency did, is that the government introduced then, if you remember, the support schemes that came along. So you had furlough, you had the self-employed support scheme, various other opportunities, and they were broadly very well received. But what they had the effect of doing was almost masking that demand for debt advice. It suppressed those numbers increasing for about 18 months. We think that particularly across the southwest and certainly in Gloucestershire as well, that people were, just about keeping their heads above the water during that period, but kicking furiously underneath. And when those schemes were pulled back in sort of broadly late 2021, we saw that demand for debt advice starting to rapidly rise again. And seamlessly we moved into this situation with everything cost of living, and I'm certainly not going to focus on the reasons for that because you're all probably as aware of it as I am. And so what we're seeing at the moment across the county is that demand for debt advice is increasing very, very quickly. And as we move into this winter, that's only going to increase some more. And certainly here at the Money and Pension Service, we don't see that alleviating in 2024, certainly not in the medium term. We can't see any dip in that. What we started to think about back in 2020 was that some of the local agencies were struggling or starting to struggle with capacity around debt advice. And how could we try and work up a system or an opportunity for getting individuals into free regulated debt advice quickly if there were perhaps not those face-to-face spaces available at local advice organisations? So we developed and we piloted what we call the Money Advisor Network. And the Money Advisor Network is a panel of 8 or 9 different organisations, regulated debt advice organisations right across England. And the basic premise is that local authorities, for example, if they're speaking to somebody who is struggling with problem debt, and that might be part of a conversation you have around council tax or benefits or housing, it doesn't really matter in that sense. And you don't have a regional connection or a local connection, or there isn't capacity within that regional or local advice agency, you can refer that individual into the Money Advisor Network. And there is currently plenty of capacity nationally across that panel of debt advice organisations. The capacity issues are not everywhere. They are localised. So it's not to say that all agencies across Gloucestershire are struggling with capacity. Some may be, some may not. But for those local authorities I'll focus on here who do need to get people into debt advice, and that person wants that regulated help, it's important to know that there is another layer of support provided by the Money and Pension Service. So effectively what happens is that you will have that conversation. One of your frontline colleagues will be having that conversation. They'll identify the need for debt advice. They will obviously get permission from the customer, the service user, to refer them in. And that will go through a very simple web referral page. And that will put that individual straight into the Money Advisor Network, at which point they have several options. They can either have an immediate callback from a debt advice organisation, and that will be the next available individual at one of our panel of debt advice organisations. So, if you're sat in Gloucester, it could be that you put in touch with a debt advisor based in Norfolk or Liverpool. It could be anywhere across England. But the important thing is that we can get people in almost immediately into the system. And as you'll be aware, for those people who are struggling with problem debt, if there are capacity issues locally, which means that they can't get an appointment for a period of weeks or even months, certainly I had a conversation with CAP in Wiltshire earlier on in the summer. This was back in June, and they were booking appointments for September at that point, 3 months out. And that 2 or 3 months can make a real negative difference to the situation that individual's in. So we can arrange an immediate callback and that person will straight away be put in touch with a debt advisor. We can also schedule a callback for the individual. It could be that they're on employment parameters. It could be that people are on shift work. Perhaps there are childcare issues that they need to navigate around. So we can arrange to have that individual called back in the next couple of days, depending on what suits them and their circumstances. The individual can also self-serve through the debt advice journey, because we do know that for some people, they are not comfortable or they're not confident having that conversation with a debt advisor. They know that they want some help, but they're not necessarily wanting to do that over the phone. And so they can actually go through a great element of that debt advice journey through themselves. And then it becomes business as usual, depending on which organisation has taken on that call. So it could be Citizens Advice, it could be a North-based agency, but that individual will be triaged and will go through what is a relatively standard debt advice conversation with a regulated advisor. One of the things that we are pushing this extra layer of support for is that we do have a serious concern right now with the alternatives that customers have who are struggling with problem debt. One of the first things that we all seem to do for everything in life these days is drop onto Google to try and find an answer for things. So if you sit down and you type in debt help Gloucestershire or something akin to that, you're certainly going to get some of the first rate agencies that are working across the county, be it City or Step Change or CAP and various others. But unfortunately, what you're also going to get is a significant number of commercial organisations who are looking to make a fee or are looking to make a commission or to sell that person's information onto an inappropriate debt advice provider, possibly an inappropriate IVA provider, something like that. And we very, very much want people across the county to be steered clear of those routes. Debt advice in England is absolutely free for everybody who needs it, and it's important that we can try and make individuals aware, certainly making the local authorities and other agencies aware that this money advisor network is available, and we can get people into that safe, regulated, free debt space. It isn't to say that what we want to do is ride roughshod over any local or regional relationships that you've got with debt advice agencies. Not at all. This is just an extra level of support. There are always going to be people with more complicated cases who need face-to-face in the local area, for example, and they perhaps might not be suitable to come in via this virtual contact centre. But for the majority of individuals, the opportunity to get them rapidly, and I'm talking inside of 30 seconds, we can get them in touch with a debt advisor. To start that conversation now is going to be of benefit. And we know, sadly, that across the county, only about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people who are in problem debt are seeking any form of professional debt advice. And we really do want to try and get as many people as possible. It's not an easy journey. Many of you will know that. I'm not going to suggest that it is, but there can be light at the end of the tunnel. And for the people in Gloucestershire who are having a difficult time, we want them to know that that route is there. I think that it's very important to understand that anybody can make use of these services. So whatever your agency, if you are having a conversation with somebody who's in problem debt, you don't need to be a local authority. You don't necessarily need to be a creditor organisation. You can actually refer people into the Money Advisor Network separately. And I'll make sure that all these details of how that operates. For your notes, the Money and Pension Service, we are absolutely free for any organisation or individual to access our resources and our services. We're fully funded by a levy on the financial services sector and also on the pensions companies for that element of our work. So There is no cost to any of your organisations at all to access those resources and that support. And it's also important, I think, when we're talking about money, that what we provide, the financial guidance that we provide, we are completely independent and we are completely impartial. So we have no endorsement or collaboration with any financial services providers or products. And I think that when we are trying to, particularly people who are struggling, there is some great guidance out there from financial services organizations. I'm not suggesting there's not, but very often that comes with a commercial caveat, maybe an account or a product or something different or a fee. So everything that is talked about here today is free to access for all of you. And I'd very much enjoy it if you were able to engage. So we are the Money and Pension Service, but the name that you will see out and about, I suppose, is Money Helper. We came to the conclusion a couple of years ago that any organisation that has the word pensions in its title tends to make people run for the hills pretty quickly. Pensions being one of the most boring topics on the face of the earth. So we decided that it needed to be a little bit more consumer friendly. So Money Helper is what you will see out there online. We are not just a digital service. We employ a significant number directly in-house financial guidance experts who can speak to your customers or your service users in confidence, one-to-one. That's free. And really that can be about anything financially that they are concerned about. It could be that it's a benefits issue. It could be that it's around housing. It could be that somebody's just starting a family and there's extra costs all of a sudden coming along. It could be that there's been a relationship breakup or illness in the family. Any and all topics, we have the internal resource to provide some really first-rate guidance and support around that. Very often, and I'll move away from debt a little bit here, very often we get organizations who are having conversations with people who are financially struggling or financially squeezed. And it might be support around things like budgeting that they require. It might be support around prioritization of bills, for example. It isn't always necessarily about problem debt, but in the current climate, we know that so many households across the county are facing a particularly bleak financial winter and into 2024. It's just incredibly important that as a national agency, we are able to support those organisations across Gloucestershire that you're representing here this morning, and to say, look, we don't have the answer to everything, but there are independent free resources that you can tap into here for the benefit of those customers and those service users that you're serving as well. So there are different ways that we can support organizations that are represented here this morning. Very often in a forum such as this, I will pick up on a conversation separately with an organization outside of this forum to talk about some bits in more detail. So there are some simple things, for example, that can be done. It may well be that you have representation, let's say, in some community hubs or libraries or local authority premises, and we have free literature. We have some fantastic free literature around cost of living support, around the safe use of credit, for example, and that's a really important topic that we have a significant focus on, particularly as we're in this time of year. We all seem to be whipping our credit cards in and out of the purses and wallets that quickly at the minute, buying presents, that they start to melt around the edges. And we know that there is a significant increase across Gloucestershire. People are accessing credit because they're trying to pay for Christmas or they're trying to make ends meet at the end of the month. And we are concerned that people are using inappropriate channels of credit. There is a heck of a lot of loan sharking going on across the county at the moment, which worries us. There is a very big rise in buy now, pay later. And buy now, pay later is becoming a major concern, not just to ourselves, but certainly the Financial Conduct Authority has buy now, pay later on its radar. And the primary reason for that is that whilst for many people. It can be a valuable way of spreading costs. People tend to make purchases emotionally and very quickly, particularly at this time of year. And they think that, well, I'm only paying back £15 this week, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. And it might be £20 next week. But if you're starting to make 2 or 3 or 4 of those purchases, then that can start to have the propensity to roll over into potentially problem debt. And people aren't taking those decisions with enough time and thought. So certainly areas around use of credit we can support with. So free guides, for example, you can order as non-commercial organizations, and I'll let Lizzie have these details. You can order free guides around, as I say, cost of living, around alternate uses to things like payday loans, so people can understand what other options. I'm a big fan of credit unions. There are some good credit unions across our region that people can access. What we want to try and do is, if people are going to borrow, we want to try and steer them away from those payday loan type organizations, certainly from illegal money lending, and suggest to people that if they are going to borrow, there are safer ways to do that, and to help them understand the ramifications of the decisions that they're making. With credit, we all borrow. You know, we all borrow at times during our life, and actually the economy needs us to borrow in order, you know, we'd all be bartering with dry grass and rocks if people didn't borrow. But we want to make sure where we can that people are accessing credit safely, and that they're understanding that they have different options, and to steer away from those inappropriate lines of credit that are going to have the propensity, as I say, to lead people down a difficult path. So we can get out there. You can order hundreds of those. There's no cost at all. Get those out into community hubs, or get them out into libraries or offices, or wherever it is that you're based out of your organization. We also have some fantastic digital tools that you can access. So I would imagine that pretty much every organization on here this morning has a website of some shape or form. We have some excellent digital tools, particularly our budgeting and bill prioritization tools are really first class. The budgeting tool we developed back in 2020, it's been accessed round and about 1.5 million times in the last three and a half years. And it allows people to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, have a cup of tea, put their own information into the budgeting content tool, and it will provide them with some really excellent bespoke guidance as to their situation, not just generic, you need to do a bit here, but it will help them understand what things that are looking okay. Importantly, it will help them understand where they might be financially vulnerable, or where they have the potential to be financially vulnerable, so that they have an opportunity to access some resource or service that can perhaps counteract that in the future. The bill prioritization tool is equally clever. I have no idea how they work. I haven't put them together, but people are right at budget limits and more, as you know, at the moment. So if they are having to make difficult choices around what to prioritize, it's important that people understand that some bills have priority, or should have priority over others, and how they can think about that and structure that. So with a very simple piece of code, those can be embedded onto your website, your external facing website, also your intranet, if that would be something of use. And customers, your service users, can access those tools without having to come to us as a third party. They can, you know, sit where they might know your services very well. They might know your website very well, and they'll be comfortable accessing that. So you've certainly got access to that. We can also look at some more bespoke support around different topics, around different issues. I really do enjoy getting out and about across the county and across the southwest. I'm just saying, Lizzie, I'm in Weston-super-Mare tomorrow, supporting an event for North Somerset Council aimed at supporting employees across businesses in North Somerset. So there are ways that we can put on virtual financial well-being sessions that cover those issues, such as budgeting, financial resilience, fraud and scams, which at the moment is another area that Unfortunately, people across Gloucestershire are getting mugged off, basically. Let's not brush it up any other way, left, right, and centre at this time of the year. So there are lots of opportunities that we've got to support your organisations. I wanted to focus on families for a moment, because many of your organisations will be working with families, families with children, and we have some really first-rate resources to support parents around money, around some of the difficult issues that they might be facing and some of the challenges they might be facing. So it could well be, as I said earlier, that somebody's starting a family and all of a sudden they've got to understand what the next year or two might look like financially. It could be that they want to help their children learn about money, for example, and the financial education setup in this country is nowhere near what it should be, in my opinion. There is an element in schools in the early teen years, but there is not too much outside of that. And if parents aren't having a conversation with children around money, the question arises, where are those youngsters getting their financial education from? I read in the newspaper back in early summer. I really was quite horrified. They polled around and about 10,000 teenagers across the country and asked them various questions about money. And one of them was, where do you get your financial education from? And 40% or so of those teenagers answered from TikTok, which really just made me almost weep, that somebody running a 30-second video to Britney Spears is giving a teenager their financial education. So there are lots of opportunities. We have a fantastic program, for example, called Talk, Learn, Do, which is a financial intervention for 3 to 11-year-olds. It's an amazing resource for parents, absolutely free to access, and it went digital about 3 months ago, and it's being hoovered up right across the country. We've just partnered with an organisation called Net Mums, which is pretty similar to Mumsnet. I'm not, they're the two sort of major parenting platforms across the country, and we're going to be looking at getting Talk, Learn, Do embedded on their platform at some point in 2024. But it's a free resource. It's a fantastic way for parents across Gloucestershire to be a bit more confident and upskill themselves a little bit in how to have those conversations with kids about money. And we know that evidentially children start to make decisions and form patterns and habits around money actually a lot earlier than most parents think, sort of 6, 7, 8 years old. And if they're not getting that financial education from anywhere else, it's important that parents are supported in being a bit more confident in having those conversations. So, that's absolutely free to access. We've also got some great learning opportunities for teenagers around money. And we got a textbook into every secondary school about 18 months ago, and that book has very recently just been made freely available for anybody to access. It's a fantastic resource for parents, also for their youngsters as well. So there's lots of things we can do around families and around children, and I'd be more than delighted to have individual conversations with your organizations if there was a particular area that you wanted to focus on, or there was a particular theme or topic that your organization perhaps works more around as part of your core offering. So delighted to do those sorts of things. Lizzie, I could sort of waffle for the rest of the morning about the broader range of services. What I'm not really going to touch on is pensions this morning, because I think that's a separate issue. There is pensions guidance for free available, and I'll certainly send over some information about that. But it's more the financial guidance, the holistic support for organisations. So if you need to refer somebody in, Lizzie, go back to what you said right at the beginning. It could well be that there are capacity issues, and I know there are across the county in many organisations. So if, for example, you're having a conversation with an individual and they want to talk to you about benefits or about housing or some such like, and you simply cannot get that individual in for a couple of weeks, then please do actively refer them into us at the Money and Pension Service. We have a large number, as I say, of in-house financial guidance experts who are very, very knowledgeable in all of these areas, and they will be able to have that conversation in confidence for free with that individual and help them get through the situation that they are in. It doesn't mean everybody can be helped, and you know that as much as I can. Sadly, there are going to be some households, some people who are in such financial crisis that it's beyond financial guidance at this point. But equally, it's important that we try and support those people where we can, be that with debt advice or some other channel. So I think, you know, to sort of wrap that up a little bit, it's that we are here. We're not, we used to be the Money Advice Service. Some of you might be familiar with that name from a few years ago. And we used to be the Pensions Advisory Service. So somebody amalgamated all these legacy organizations 4 or 5 years ago, which is where the Money and Pension Service came from. But we have a significant amount of resource. As I say, it's independent and it's free for your organizations to access across really any particular area of money and finances that people you talk to, people you support, might be struggling with or might just want to know some more about. It could be that people are renting for the first time and they don't understand some of the issues. It could be that they're struggling with insurances or car payments. It could be a whole host of things. We are here to help them. We are here to have those conversations with them. And we're here to support you as organisations across Gloucestershire for the benefit of those people in the county who need that support. So Lizzie, I'm kind of going to open it up a little bit if I may. If anybody does, I didn't see if there was any questions in the chat because I wasn't sort of looking down there, but if anybody has got anything they'd like to ask or delve into a bit more, then please do shout out. Obviously, I've not been able to deep dive into many topics individually this morning. We've not the time for that, but I will certainly make sure that for the local authorities who are represented this morning, that I will provide information around the Money Advisor Network, but I will also put on some information as to how other organisations can access that. I will make sure that we have a broad range. Okay, Joe, do we provide any training? The answer to that is kind of a yes, Joe, and let me expand on that if I might. So we have a program that we developed back in 2021 in its pilot form. It's called Money Guiders. And what we know is that across the county, across Gloucestershire, there are a significant number of people who, as part of their day-to-day working remit, are having conversations about money with customers and with service users. But actually, it might necessarily not be part of your core job remit. Could be that you work in a library, for example, and somebody's coming in to seek some guidance about something. Well, the librarian's not necessarily skilled or confident enough to have that conversation about money, even if it's to signpost elsewhere. So the Money Guiders program was developed to support and provide some training and resource to anybody in the non-regulated sector who's talking about finances. So that could be community workers, it could be social link workers, it could be people working on the front line in your organizations, going out into the community. It could be a whole range of people. And we have at the moment about 200 formal program partners in the Money Guiders program. We're not onboarding formal partners at this point because we're just upscaling the Money Guiders program because we want to expand it significantly. However, the training and the resources are available to any and all of your organizations. So there is a fantastic resource. It's called the Money Guiders England Network. Currently has around and about 6,000 people as part of that network. And it's people like yourselves from a whole range of different agencies who are having conversations with individuals or households who are financially struggling. You've got access to training resources, you've got access to events, peer-to-peer learning, all sorts of different things. And it's all about money guidance and becoming more confident in having those conversations with end users about money guidance. So that is a really good opportunity. Joe, that's absolutely free to access. And it's some great stuff. So I will make sure that is part of what I send over to Lizzie. Fiona, do you fill out forms? The answer to that is going to be no, Fiona. And the reason for that, sorry, Fiona, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Fiona, I apologise if I've not. The reason for
Sorry,
that,
it's Fina. Sorry, I couldn't
Fina,
put
sorry,
my hand up.
Fina.
The dog was barking. No worries.
Yeah, no, I've been hoping mine weren't kicking off this morning. There are some builders doing some work next door and they're making a right racket out the back. My two keep going berserk about it this morning. It's driving me mad. Fina, we can't undertake that element for people. There are always going to be those individuals who require face-to-face and to have support with form filling, etc., across whatever the particular topic is. We understand that. I'm afraid we're just not set up to be able to do that with individuals. We can talk to that individual. We can provide them with the guidance and the access to the resources and support, but we're not able to do that. There is a comment down here that the grey area about giving guidance, when does it become advice? So we can't help people with that. Joe, I'll answer that question. We are under law, we are not allowed to give financial advice at the Money and Pensions Service. So what we provide is financial guidance, and there is a grey area between guidance and advice. But so the way I always sort of try and illustrate it in a simple way is to say, let's say somebody is wanting to start putting a bit of money aside and they're thinking about something like an ISA, for example. They can come to us, they can learn what an ISA is, how it works, what the pluses are, what the downsides are, etc., etc. But it would then be for the individual to go away and choose a product. Financial advice is, I would sit here and say, you've got products A, B, and C, and I recommend you take product B. That's the broad difference. So that area is grey, but we do not stray into financial advice. We very, very much focus on financial guidance. Then I'm just looking at that here. Yeah, I can see where you're coming in on that. It's really quite difficult, and this I think is where money guiders could be beneficial, because understanding where that grey zone is, and for practitioners to understand, actually, they can signpost, they can have these wider conversations about money, but when does it tip over and become advice? And if you get that decision wrong or that conversation wrong, yes, there are going to be some customers where it can come back round and bite people. And obviously understanding where that line in the sand is important. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that piece about older patients as well. There are going to be some agencies that are better suited to having those conversations than us. It could be Age UK, for example. It could be Citizens Advice. It could be another local or regional agency. There is always going to be a cohort of individuals across the county who we can't directly help because we're not able to provide that face-to-face service. So we do understand that. But for the majority, they are well suited to come in and have that conversation with us. I've got a hand up from Alexander. Alexander, good morning.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for everything so far. It's really
You're
interesting.
welcome.
Just a quick one. I've been trying to think of how to phrase this, so sorry if it's a little bit all over the place. But are you able to signpost, I suppose, if we were to send service users across to you?
Yeah.
They tend to have a bit of a litany of complex issues.
Yeah.
If you're not able to help them in the first instance, do you have access to other services yourself that you can sort of signpost towards them?
Yeah.
Or for them?
Yeah. Okay. So very often, you know, you'll know better than I, Alexander, that very often people are coming to you with complex financial needs. It's not just necessarily that perhaps they've got some credit card debt or they're behind on their council tax. It could be that there's benefits issues. It could be that there's housing issues, all sorts of different things. So when people come to us, if we cannot deal with that ourselves, which is unusual, 95+% of the time, you know, we can make sure the person gets the guidance that they need, then yeah, we will suggest to them that they engage with, you know, their local CAB. It could be their local debt advice agency. It could be, you know, it could be that they're a resident of a housing association. It would be more beneficial to have that conversation around arrears with a financial inclusion officer at the housing association, for example. So the answer to that is yes, we would do that. If we cannot support people. We also do have very, very strict protocols around people who, if they are referred into us and are having significant mental health issues, for example. I've listened into some calls when I was joining MAPS, you know, and I've heard people threatening suicide on the phone because their debt is spiraling out of control. We have very strict support protocols for bringing in other agencies if, for example, somebody is particularly vulnerable and they're talking to us and there is clearly a more complicated issue than just money. So I hope that's an answer that makes a bit of sense, Alexander. But yeah, you know, we will work alongside other agencies to make sure that if it is not us that's perhaps the most appropriate organisation to support that person, that we very much will work to make sure they get the connection into those organisations who possibly are better suited.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that's great.
I hope that wasn't too waffly, Alexander. But
No worse than my question in the first place, Paul. No, thank you very much.
I don't think we've got any more questions in the chat at the moment, but would anyone else like to come in at this point with any thoughts or comments about what they've heard and how it might be useful, or how they might be able to use some of the services that Paul's gone through? Nobody's jumping up. I know that I think we've got a couple of people on the call. Oh no, we've got Joe. Do you want to come in, Joe?
Hi, Joe.
Hi. So I'm from a community hub, and we have another organisation that comes in once a week and gives money advice. But we're inundated. We've got so many people. She hasn't got enough time to see everyone in one day. So we've started training up some volunteers to do a bit more signposting. So all this information, I can point them in the right direction now and get them over to you. It's really, really helpful. And just the guidance and the advice thing, this is what we're worried about at the moment with the signposters leaning into advice by accident. So any training we can get them will be really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. It's such an important point, and actually it's something that puts some organizations off having those conversations with customers or service users, because money is a very emotive issue, and they do worry that if you say the wrong thing or point somebody in the wrong direction, that could come round and you know bite you on the backside as an organization. And I note the point that Fina made in the chat there. So the Money Guiders resources and learning opportunities, Joe, would be ideal for that, because the competency framework that sits around that, the very first element of that learning is around the difference between guidance and advice, and how you actually structure those conversations to make sure that you're not stepping over that regulatory boundary into financial advice. So I think that would be a really good opportunity for your colleagues or your volunteers, Joe, across the organisation to engage with that. So I'll make sure that that's clearly highlighted when I get that over to Lizzie later today.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to speak with you.
And you.
I just wondered, Paul, we've got some agencies here that are regulated, and I
Yeah.
know that some have contracts sort of with yourselves
Yeah.
around the debt advice, and I just wondered if you could just for a couple of minutes just explain what those contracts are, because if there were regulated agencies here that aren't aware of those, whether that's something that still is available that you're offering as a resource, as an opportunity, or not.
Yeah, okay. I'll sort of tread carefully on this one, Lizzie. The reason is that although we fund a lot of debt advice in England, we're not the only funders of debt advice, and there are some amazing organisations in that space doing some really, some incredible work. There was a process a year or so ago to provide new structured funding around debt advice in England. Some organisations were successful with that process and are part of it, some are not. It isn't the case that if there are agencies who are not funded by MAPS, that they can sort of apply to get funding for a debt advice worker, for example. That I'm sorry, excuse me. That isn't how the situation works. The money and pensions will go out again, and I think we're just about to start consulting on the next tranche of that. And we're effectively told by on high how much money is available for debt advice for us, and then we will procure those debt advisors or those agencies across England to work with us as part of our sort of framework, if you like. But no, I'm afraid there isn't an opportunity, Lizzie, for a local agency to apply for some funding under that. That's not how the system is set up to work. It's more of an umbrella sort of framework type understanding. But they're able to access everything else. They're able to access the money advisor network and put people in, but we're just we don't fund outside of that framework, if that makes sense.
And then one last point I suppose would be interesting is that for some agencies they may have funding and roles available to recruit debt advisors and advisors in general, but actually there's a real struggle to find the advisors, so to fill those roles. And I just wondered whether you had any thoughts or comments around that, and whether that's a unique issue or whether it's something that you're seeing across the country. Is actually the recruitment process is hard at the moment.
Not being a professional debt advisor, I would say this, that it's probably one of the toughest jobs that there is out there, because you're having conversations with vulnerable individuals on a daily basis. And I think I couldn't really say statistically that there is a sort of a shortage or a difficulty in recruiting, but anecdotally, I do know that people have been leaving the industry in the last 2 or 3 years because it's difficult for them to be involved in that. Funding issues aside, because that's not really my sort of remit in MAPS. It's a tough job. So I what I will do is on that question, what I'll do is I will speak with one of our senior debt policy people here at MAPS. So I'll see if we've got any research or we've got any information on that might provide a bit more insight. I don't have sort of evidentially down in Gloucestershire or in the southwest, Lizzie, but certainly I think there are recruitment issues. Whether that's I don't think that's probably bespoke to Gloucestershire. I would imagine that it's across the country, but I know there's some issues. People have had burnout, quite frankly. The last 3 years through the pandemic has been very, very difficult. And to be a debt advice caseworker, I take my hat off to every individual, because it must be a bloody hard day, frankly. But let me ask somebody internally, see if we got anything that might cast a bit more light on that for you.
That's kind, Paul. Would anyone else like to come in before we wrap up the workshop today? Any other thoughts or comments? And obviously, please, feel free to get in touch. Both Paul and I will put our details now in the chat, and I will send an email out to everyone that registered through Eventbrite, just, you know, summarising and sending out the information that Paul's going to send on to me. But the conversation can obviously carry on. And one thing that Paul has said to me is that, you know, if there was any desire or requirement to do anything at more district level with Paul coming along, or any in-person events, that's something obviously that Paul and I have spoken to, and Feeding Gloucestershire would look to try and facilitate and coordinate if that's something of use. So please, you know, do get in touch with myself if there's anything else that you'd like to look at or pursue around what you know, Paul and his team can do and support with. Otherwise, it really just leaves me to thank you, Paul, for your time today, for coming and speaking to everyone. And as soon as I've had the information from Paul, I will obviously forward that all to you all. And if last plug on the IVAN leaflets, that if anyone would like some more information about those leaflets or copies of them, please do get in touch. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and I hope
thank you, Lizzie, from me.
A good rest of the day.
Enjoy that. And do pick up with me, anybody who wants to speak separately. But thanks all for your time this morning, and hopefully we'll be doing some work and trying to support you in the near future. Anne, is that a last quick question, Anne? I saw a hand.
No, sorry, hit the wrong button.
Hit the wrong button. Thanks, Anne. That happens to me every single day of the week. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.